have a flat in the urban heart of Birmingham, and right now it's a pretty cool place to live. But would you stay here if you had kids? Would you send your children to an inner city comprehensive? So for our most vulnerable kids, the poorest, the disadvantaged, it turns out that if they go to school here in slightly grotty looking urban Birmingham, they'll do better than if they go to school in leafy Worcestershire. And that seems really contradictory, topsy-turvy, but that's what the statistics prove. Birmingham isn't perfect, but schools here do a better job at educating disadvantaged kids than schools not just in Worcestershire, but in Shropshire and Gloucestershire and many other rural bits of the Midlands. So if schools in, say, Worcestershire did the same job that schools do here in inner city Birmingham, well, then you'd completely change the lives of thousands of school children. So I want to find out what's going on and what can be done to change it. We'll be travelling to the countryside to see what's gone wrong in a moment, but we start in Birmingham to find out just what's gone so right with our inner city schools.
I'm very proud of the fact that we now have around 40 students every year going to university, whereas when I came here we didn't have any.
Head teacher Nikki Walters is in charge of around 800 pupils in a school in Handsworth in Birmingham. Over half the pupils here are classed as disadvantaged. So what problems do disadvantaged kids have?
I think they've missed out on some of the basic things that help any student learn. So we have to find ways of addressing that, but in a very short amount of time.
And it's worked. This school has climbed the league tables. It's now outstanding. If our rural schools performed as well as this one does, lives would be changed, and that would bring benefits to all of us.
We're talking 30,000, 40,000 children who are in that lowest 20% bracket. If those 30,000, 40,000 children do not get the level of support that they need, then they are going to be really quite a burden.
And that's a burden we all have to deal with. Professor Sonia Blandford investigated disadvantaged kids when she worked at the University of Warwick. Now she runs a charity to help schools help them.
If you look at rural and coastal communities, there is a sense of isolation for the schools. They're not next door to each other. There's a huge emphasis currently on peer-to-peer support. We engage with that. It's very difficult if you're 15 miles away from the nearest school to get another idea, to get development and to share positive activity. So there is a sense of isolation.
But is it just about isolation, or is there more to it? Well, the really bad rural schools weren't that keen to let us film them, so I'm travelling to Shropshire and to Bishop's Castle Community College. It's a school that's been praised by Ofsted for doing a great job, especially teaching its disadvantaged pupils. Are the challenges this school faces different to the problems we heard about in Birmingham?
I think it's very easy for students and for staff and for parents in some respect not to have high enough aspirations, not to aspire to become doctors, lawyers, to work in cities, to work abroad. I'm not saying that they have to in the slightest, but there is an element of being surrounded by the hills and somewhat being confined by them.
Nurse, give me a lift for Streeton.
Expanding horizons, though, is hard work when you don't have the facilities towns and cities take for granted. And what you do have is disappearing.
A news agent. Kirsty's
News agent shut down. We used to have a football team here, but the football team here shut down for my age when I was 10 years old, so now I have to drive 40 minutes to get to my football team.
So that theatre we saw you in earlier, that might be closed down. You might lose that.
Yeah, that's under threat right now. All of it is the sports centre and the theatre.
It's so annoying. It's like the one time that we actually have something for our community that we can easily get to, because we can go after school, we can go in school to the gym. It's going to be taken away because we just don't have the money for it.
So as theatres, gyms, even shops are closing, this school has to step in and try and fill the gap. Parents have to step up too. Parents like Fiona Lewis, often found helping out in the school at the end of the week, but she's not helping with ordinary lessons. Yeah, what happens on a Friday? Tell us about that.
All sorts. A lot happens on a Friday afternoon. The timetable goes to pot and all the children do exciting things, different things, things that are not on the curriculum at all. They got the opportunity to do things which enrich.
It's actually called Enrichment Friday. There's a chance to try everything from drama, sport and music to engineering, horse riding, even interior design. Their kids love it.
Older students are like, what, you get to do all those things? That's so cool. And like, they just had lessons and
they literally had nothing.
All the students benefit, but Enrichment Friday is really good news for disadvantaged pupils because their parents don't have a car or even the cash for activities outside school. It's one reason this school has rapidly closed the gap between disadvantaged pupils and the rest of the students. So all we need to do is show other rural schools how they do things here and the job's done. Problem sorted, right?
It only goes so far. At the end of the day, funding has a major influence on the opportunities and the outcomes that students get around the country and in this school as well. If funding was fairer for rural schools, there are lots of other things that we could do.
Ah yes, funding. That's the other problem rural schools face, no matter how good they are. So there's two root causes to this problem, this failure to help some of our most vulnerable kids. The first is a lack of ambition, not helping the kids to see beyond the hills. But the second one is cash. And it may not be more cash, it might be just sharing out what there is more fairly. Time for some answers then. First, how do we improve the worst rural schools? Seems like a job for Ofsted, the school regulator. But it turns out not only do they know it's a problem, it's their top priority here in the West Midlands.
Shropshire is one of the worst performing local authorities in the country for the performance of disadvantaged children. Only 1 in 4 of those children get 5 GCSEs A to C with English and Maths. That is appallingly low. I was talking to counsellors and they see that in Shropshire children are doing well, but when I showed them the figures for the disadvantaged children, some of them are really quite shocked by that and realise there's much more that they could do to help improve that.
And what about cash? More money would mean even the best rural schools could do even better. Well, 50 of the government's own MPs are right now banding together and arguing for fairer funding for their schools, including Shropshire MP Daniel Kawczynski.
I could take you to schools where parents are having to have barbecues and raffles and fundraisers to raise money for basic equipment, which places in Birmingham and London get automatically. And that is simply unfair and unsustainable. What we're expecting during the course of this Parliament is that the lowest funded areas will receive much larger, much disproportionate increases in their funding, so that ultimately over a period of the next 5 to 10 years, those differences will be reduced.
So Ofsted say improving the prospects of disadvantaged children is a priority, and MPs are uniting to tackle the problem, but still 10 years to get fairer funding. Thousands of kids living in Shropshire, Worcestershire, Staffordshire and Gloucestershire are being let down by our school system right now. And as we continue to pour money and resources into our city schools, many say rural schools are being forgotten. And the message from critics and campaigners is really clear.
If we want to solve this hidden crisis, we need to start talking about it and say this is a problem and it's not good enough for our kids.